Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to show some love to my 2012 Seagull S12 Coastline. I've noticed that the fretboard is starting to accumulate DNA, so it's time to give that a little cleanup, and you can see that by these pictures. And so it is obviously time. Now the strings are getting to be needing replaced soon, but not just quite yet. So we are going to engage the capo. So let's get to it. Off to the bench. So as usual, when reusing the strings, like for whenever you're doing a setup where you don't want to change the strings right off the bat, you always want to do your setup on old strings. That way, because you're going to be loosening and tightening, so you don't want to take a chance at breaking one of the strings. So when you are loosening off, you always do the skinny strings first, because that way you're not going to put the extra pressure on them when you loosen off these big heavy strings, which are keeping a lot of the pressure, and taking a chance at breaking one of the narrow ones. So always loosen the skinny strings first. So now we've removed the strings from the fretboard. Loosen them off, pull them off to the sides. That's why the capo's here, to keep the spindles from getting bundled up. And then the nut has come out. It's loose, it always has been. I don't bother with it because the pressure of the 12 strings pushing on it will keep it from moving anywhere. If you do want to glue it, a little dab of just basic Elmer's white glue, nothing drastic, a little wee bit right there, because all you want to do is just hold it in spot. The pressure of the strings will hold it in there tight. If you use super glue or something, you are going to have a mess trying to get it off if you ever have to replace the nut, which I am going to have to replace the nut at some time. I've just decided to leave it that way because, as I say, the pressure of the strings hold it in place. Now we've done the old rope trick with the strings to keep them tied behind the back. All we did was take a little piece of string, go down, pull these set of strings off the side, rope down through, those over there, up through, tie behind its back. And that will keep them away from the fretboard. So what I'm going to do is get a little bit of warm water, and with a touch of hand soap, a nice mild hand soap or dish soap, and a toothbrush. And with that, we are just going to dip our toothbrush in the soap. Just get a little bit of soap on it. You don't need it too much. I'm actually going to take some of that off, and then we're just going to scrub the fretboard. Now you don't want to leave the wet on the fretboard for too long, but for the amount of time it's going to take to do this, it should not be an issue. Now we're using a toothbrush because it's a fairly mild brushing. And you don't want to use toothpaste because it has some very not abrasive, but very strong cleaners in it. Siri, remind me to get new toothbrushes. Now these frets up in here usually don't get a lot of play in, so they just require a slight brushing over. And you really should go with the grain. It's easier to get that stuff cleaned out from down and deep. Now let's have a closer look at that. First off, the brush is rather brown now. Brown now? Brown now, cow? Yeah, whatever. Okay. Oh, drink. Now let's wipe them down with a dry cloth. inspect them to see how it looks. Now it is a little gray, so my guess is that that is still DNA. And it's the first 4 or 5 frets mainly take the DNA on mine, because I usually just play a lot of cowboy cards. So we're going to spend a little extra time right up in the headstock area. Okay. Oh, drink. And inspect. Yes, it is dried out fairly good, so while the pores are open and inviting, we will get out our not a paid promotion, and then apply. Apply fairly liberally. Making sure you get complete coverage. And we're going to let it sit on there for a little bit. And as I say, up near the end here, not a lot of fingers going up in here anyways, so it's mainly just making sure we get good coverage. We'll give her a couple of minutes to kind of make sure it seeps in well. I'm going to start cleaning up at this end while the other end still seeps in. And you want to use a clean, fresh cloth, soft. All I do is use old t-shirt material. Make sure you cut any of the hems and the seams off, because the nylon strings that they used to use the hems and seams is supposed to be really strong, and although it's not going to matter much on your fretboard, if you're cleaning the rest of your guitar, and especially with these Seagulls, because they are solid cedar top, which is fairly soft, you could literally eventually, with time, over and over again, create an issue with the finish. Now we're going to look from here up that way, and where the fretboard does not get much use, the liquid is staying fairly well on top. But down here where my fingers do play a lot is a little more dry. So we're going to make a second coat. Shake vigorously. I think we'll just stop at that point. Now we'll let it sit on there for a couple more minutes before we come back and clean it off. While we're waiting for that to install, we can take our actual guitar cleaner, spray cleaner, and always spraying the rag, not the guitar. Not a paid promotion. Now once again, remembering a clean, fresh rag. Do not mix your potions. because some chemicals have reactions when introduced to each other. And while one is an oil that is to seep into the grain, this is a cleaner, which is to clean off the grain. And so they will most likely work against each other. Now you can also, of course, use the fretboard oil on the bridge, but we're not changing the strings today, so that's just going to make a mess. You do that when you have all the strings off, the pegs out, and the saddle out, and then you can condition the bridge. Look at it in the light. In the light. And it's pretty good and clean. The only part I really have to do any work on is right around where the pick guard meets the soundboard. Now, just for good measures, I'm going to go over it one more time with the cleaner. And you should always do this in a well-ventilated area, because this cleaner is good cleaning. You may hear some more birds. Now let's look over the fretboard, and it does seem to be sitting on top, so it's probably time to clean off a bit more. Okay, now I guess it's time to put this thing all back together and see how it turned out. Release the strings. Which, as I said, voila. Replace the nut and restring. Okay. Now, once we do that, we're going to start tightening the strings again, but we just put enough pressure on them to keep them straight, because then we want to adjust them. So as I say, we just want to put a little bit of tension on them, because we want to make sure that the nut, because this is a floating nut, we want to make sure it's in the perfect spot. Okay, that looks fairly good. Now let's bring it up to tune. We've double checked to make sure the nut is properly spaced. We want to go over this end and make sure that all these are evenly spaced as well, which they all seem to be. Tune up time. And of course, while tuning, always get it into tune. Give the strings a good tug, because they have to settle into their spot again. They've been loosened off for about an hour or two. Oh, we went through all that, and guess what? The strings need changing. Does that suck or what? So what we've done here is taken this all apart, did up the fretboard, put it all back together, and found out that the strings need changing because they're flat. So, part 2, coming right up. poo. But it's probably all for the best, because what we also found out was once we got it put all back together and I was going to take the after pictures, I found out that some of the oil that I put on the fretboard was not completely removed and sitting on there. And we don't want that. We don't want the oil to get in underneath the frets and loosen them. And that is why we always double check our work. After you get all the strings removed from that end, there's a little gap in the center thing that helps to remove the pegs. Do that cautiously, because you don't want to damage your bridge. The good news is now we can condition the bridge. 2 purple, 2 aluminum, 2 green, 2 red, 2 black, and 2 gold. Got all our strings here. Make them into like a little bouquet. And twist, wrap. Make sure you get all of them. Roll the coil down to the squeezy end and then through the bottom and through. And put them in the recycle. So now we condition the bridge. We'll get some on the cloth to do the edge, trying not to get too much on the faceplate of the guitar. And so one of the first things you want to check with your headstock is the nuts around the spindles. You want to do that while the strings are off it, because you need a deep 10mm socket. You need a deep 10mm because a shallow one will get pushed off by these here spindles. So when you get a deep one, you've got it also deep enough that you can kind of make sure that they are secure without having to actually get a ratchet or speed handle, etc. I'm just going to make sure that they're all snug, which I know they are because I just did them last time. But you always want to check them just in case. And everyone is secure. Now, second thing is the winding tension. I'm going to go over each one of the tuners and turn them. Make sure that they are all smooth. That one's a little bit loose, so there's a little Phillips in the end of it. We tighten this a little bit and check it again. Yeah, good. We want pretty much the same tension, nothing too drastic. We don't want them too hard to turn. This one can be loosened just a tad. And so, as I say, you want to make sure that these nuts around the spindles are tightened, 10mm socket, and the screws on the end of the paddles are for the tension. So the tension of the winders is by the Phillips screw in the end, and the 10mm socket on top are what holds the tuners in place solidly. So at that point, we're going to remove the excess oil off of the bridge, and then we will start to restring it. And luckily enough, I have plenty extra strings because, well, being a 12 string, you always want to have some available in case you pop the third from the skinniest octave up string, which some say is the G string. With me it's an F because I have it down tuned one, but scissors time. And restringing is fairly simple. You take the spindle roller on the end of the string in this pattern, down in the hole, groove to the same, push down insofar you want to get to the point where the pins goes farther down but the string does not. That means that you're going to have it in the proper spot. Always past the, you're going to this peg, you go past the next two and cut it off there. At least when you're doing it on a 12 string or an electric where you have 6 tuners up to one side, go up through the nut, which will be there in a minute. If you're going into this spindle, go up past the next two and then cut it there, and that will give you lots of extra room. Okay, so I'm not going to make you watch me restring a guitar, so it's going to go by like that. And so we have all the strings on now. What we're going to do is go across the bottom, make sure that the spacing is fairly consistent. You might have to tighten the strings a bit to make them stay in spot, like this one here, which is number 4. Make sure all your pegs are sunk and solid. I'm going to use a nice soft plastic side of the winder. Don't push way too hard because you don't want to damage the soundboard or anything. Just make sure all of them are seated properly. Okay, so all the strings are fairly consistently spaced. In a 12 string there are front and back strings, pegs. The rear pegs, the string comes out and goes off and around the front peg. I believe that I have always let it sit against the front peg because that gives us a half width of the pin spacing between these strings. And so it is. So now let's bring it up to tune. And as you're tuning, get to the note. Get it close and then reef on it some, making sure your peg is solid, and because then it'll be low. As we say, always bring to tune, wiggle, bring to tune, wiggle, because it's going to take a while for these here strings to settle in. So there we have it. I guess we did a full tune-up on it today. Let's take a look down the neck. May as well check the action at the 12th while we're here. And we have in millimeters 2, two and a bit, pretty much 2 across the board. Might take a bit for it to settle in. That's a little high for me personally, but it'll be fine. So with that, thank you for watching. Share, like, subscribe. Check out the other videos on my site. You might find something there you're interested in. Leave a comment below. Tell me what I did right, what I did wrong. I know I do things wrong. Tell me about it. We'll catch you next time. Bye now.